Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast. I'm your host, Byron Greeley, and today's guest is Lottie Unwin, the founder of Upworld and Brand Hackers. Upworld is a community for startup marketers, and Brand Hackers is a business that sets up fractional marketing teams for brands. This is a very interesting conversation. We talk about how Lottie unconventionally started her business. We talk about the value of taking action, and we talk about how she set up her communities, how it's run, and the difficulties of running a community. It's a very interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure you will too. Enjoy the show. Hey Lottie, thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to chat with you. And to dive right in, can you tell me a bit about what Upworld is and how it works?
Of course. Upworld is a world of expertise for startup marketers. So what that means in actual terms is that we have a community called Up Club where a member pays a small monthly subscription to get access to a Slack group, to 1,000 other bright minds to help with problems and questions, to online events, parties. We're having a picnic next month in Hyde Park, supper clubs, all of the good stuff that comes with being part of a community. We also run training and courses, and we have a marketing-specific recruitment service. So one of the key things our members need is support getting new roles. So we do a lot of work to help them.
Amazing. And what gave you the idea to start Upworld?
I think it's really important. I think it's really important that there's more stories about entrepreneurs that start with it was an accident, and not this kind of big idea narrative that we're taught. So for me, I knew I wanted to start a business. And when I was a child, even at a really young age, I was definitely a builder. So I was always kind of creating stuff and making worlds and designing ideas, but I didn't know what that was ever going to look like. So I never had a moment where I had an idea. Instead, I made the move from big business to small business. So I was at Procter & Gamble, and then I went to go and join a startup called Propercorn, and I was really lonely. I loved the energy of being in a startup, but I just felt completely on my own, so isolated. So I basically started a supper club 12 years ago to meet other heads of marketing in startups. Didn't think it was an idea, didn't think it was a thing, just did it because I needed it. And then there were a few little moments along the way where I got a bit of an indication that if I put a bit more effort in, I could make something a little bit bigger and a little bit more impactful. And that happened over and over again. The idea of Upworld as it is at the moment is really new. So it's only the last few years, well after I started hiring a team, well after I'd started building out and paying myself from this thing, that I really had a view of what it could become in the future. And I'd say that future view is still really evolving. So I never had an idea. I solved a problem for myself a long time ago, and it turned out lots of other people needed it too.
That's so interesting. And how did you go about building out that supper club? Was it people in your network, or did you reach out to people outside of your network, or was it a balance?
Just the most unscalable, embarrassing graft. And I'm obsessed with the tactics that you use to get your business from 0 customers to 20 customers and 20 to 100, because they are not sexy. It was it was WhatsApping. I don't even think WhatsApp existed, or maybe it was. I can't even remember what I was doing then. It was messaging, Facebook messaging people I knew to say, hey, do you know anyone who's called a head of marketing or a head of brand? Can you introduce me? It was lots of just LinkedIn DMs. It was lots of going back through my brain to think of anyone I'd ever met. So that person I went to university with, I think now works at a startup. If I message them, then maybe they'll introduce me to their head of marketing. It was proper graft. And a little bit of the people who were coming, having a nice time and introducing me to someone else, which I think is important, because if you're not getting any of that, any signals from the market that anyone wants what you're doing,
then
it's stop. aboard. But I wouldn't say that it was like an immediate snowball. Like I was getting some signals, but I was also having to do loads of really labour-intensive manual work to build out the group.
And where was the inflection point? Because I imagine you started off free by just inviting people to a sub club. Where did the payment part come into play?
So gradually. So the first thing that happened was, one, I was going out for dinner a lot and it was getting quite expensive. Because I was hosting like one of these a month and and I wasn't earning very much at the time. So for me to be paying whatever it was, like £60 to have a nice meal and then to get a cab home because I'd been hosting all evening and I was exhausted, it's kind of costing me like, say it was £100 a month. So that was one thing that was in my head, which was like, it'd be really nice to not have to fund that. And then the other thing was that people weren't showing up. So we had really high drop-off rates. So my first monetization strategy was get everyone to pay £5 to secure their place. That covers my bill. And then they show up because they've given us a deposit.
Nice.
It wasn't, clearly that's not a business plan. Like that's a long way off, where I am now. I have a team of 20. So the first bit was just cover my costs. And then one of the big light bulb moments, if the way I think about my story is that there was never a big light bulb moment. There was just like loads of little flickers. There was a big flicker when I moved abroad. So I left London and moved to India and was in Delhi working at my kitchen table with all of this like life freedom to create my own business. So my ex-boyfriend and I had worked out all of our finances, that he was earning enough to pay for both of us. And I basically followed him around the world. So the deal was very much like, you don't really need to earn. Let's just do this. And then you can work yourself out later and that can come at another point. And when I was doing that process of kind of having the time to start thinking about what my business was actually going to be, I just kept getting so many emails from people being like, when's the next meetup? Or can you help me hire for this role? Or do you have a training course on this? And that's when I started really, really experimenting with monetization, because I began to see how much demand there was, and that if I had the time available, I could serve my members better. And yet, because I was doing freelance work, I was really seeing my time as cash.
Yeah.
So I started to understand, okay, well, I probably could start doing recruitment, but in order to be able to put 2 days aside for recruitment, I'll need to feel comfortable that I'm making £1,000 a month from recruitment. What would I need to charge to be able to cover my time? And in that thinking, it shifted in my brain from asking for money as grubby to, if I ask for money, I can give a better service and therefore I can still offer really incredible value, because the service can still be disproportionate to what I'm asking for from someone.
Yeah.
But it's fair that I'm asking for a financial transaction. And then I think the other part of that was I was living in India where there's like abject poverty and a real need for money. And a pound goes so far there that it became really clear to me that if I was going to do charitable work, I needed to do it there, not for like middle-class marketing people in London. It just seemed so weird that they were the people I was doing unpaid work for. Like I was running this weird charity for brand managers. It's like, no, this is stupid. Let me run a business for brand managers and use that business to create revenue that I can invest in supporting really socioeconomically disadvantaged people in India, which is what I've gone on to do.
Right. Amazing. And were you surprised when you started increasing your prices, like by the reactions of people? Or did anyone sort of bat an eyelid?
We tested it pretty carefully. So
Okay.
At every point we've said to the community, what do you think? We ask the community what they think it's worth all the time, and we keep quite a good tab on it. I'm also really of the view that most things in life are reversible. So if you put your prices up too high and it doesn't work, you just tone them down again. And so long as you're open about that and you front into it and say, hey, we learned, we did this and we learned this, we're really sorry, then I think especially in a business like ours, people are really forgiving.
Yeah.
I think customers have a way shorter memory and are way more supportive of small businesses than we like to think we are.
I think that's the case for almost everything. We think we are
Yeah.
the center of everyone's attention.
Yeah.
But we're not
No
really.
one cares.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And in our conversation before this call, you mentioned, well, we discussed what makes like an interesting person. And I was wondering if you could explain what you believe makes up an interesting person.
I'm trying to remember what I said before.
Well, I think it had to do with you going to India and more experiences than trying to be an interesting person through like your career, for example.
Oh, yeah. Okay, wow. So it's interesting. It's interesting when you ask me that question about interesting people. What came into my head now on a sort of exhausted Tuesday after a bank holiday is that I think, to me, interesting people are innately curious and don't feel the need to establish their own position in social context, but are like comfortable enough to just absorb that around them. I think that's a really amazing attribute in someone, and like reflects a real like peace in themselves. And yeah, what I discovered going to India was that so much of my London identity had been tied up by my job, and that I think it probably made it very difficult for me to take the leap and start a business, because the only way that I saw myself as having value was to say, you know, I'm head of marketing at X startup. And that gave me a sense of identity. And then I moved abroad and no one cared what I did as a job. And actually, instead, my default identity was like as my ex-boyfriend's partner. Like I was like the plus one.
Yeah.
I was kind of like this diplomat's wife. And that was weird because I'd never thought of my identity as like being someone's partner. But I found it really liberating, and it gave me the space, I think, to just like experiment during the week, because it didn't really matter whether I'd proven anything to anyone, because I'd go out on a Thursday night and they wouldn't care what I'd been doing during the day. And I do see that in entrepreneurs a lot, like a real discomfort in the bit when they're just really finding their feet. You know, those early stages when you've got no idea what you're really doing and you've got nothing to show for it that's particularly sexy, because the reality is you're having like 5 conversations on WhatsApp and that's the extent of your business development. Like you can't go to a dinner party and look prestigious because you've got, you know, before you've got a website or before you've got anything to show for it. I think people find that stage really crippling, and so they rush through it and make loads of mistakes. And so I do think actually the experience of going somewhere where no one cared meant that I could slow down and do it in my own time.
And if you said your identity was kind of linked to your role before you left London, how did you manage to take that step and leave that role and just move to India?
So I don't think that much about my journey has been very brave. People always say to me, "I'm so brave that you started a business." And I'm like, the way I did it, there was no brave moment. My ex and I had been together for a very long time. He was a journalist. We'd both really wanted to move abroad. I was working in like food and drink marketing. There was no way a company was going to move me anywhere. So we just made the decision and said, if you ever get a job, I'll follow. And it was what I really wanted to do. So when he came home and said, I've got an offer for a role in Delhi, should we go? I like bit his hand off. I was like, yeah, of course we're going. And so there was no, like, obviously it was sad and scary leaving friends and family, but I was more excited than I was about anything I'd ever done. Like I was so sure that that was what I needed to do. So he created that, like we created that opportunity for ourselves. I didn't have to decide.
That's fascinating. Because from the outside looking in, when you hear someone say that, and you previously were quite career focused in your role, and it seems like you took a leap when you just like brush over it. I'm
very career focused. My obsession with travel is probably the one thing I feel more strongly about.
Interesting.
And there are definitely moments today, like I took a month off last August to go on sabbatical and spend a month in Colombia. That was not good for business. Like, let's be real. Bad business decision. But for me, an absolute, like, no questions. as to whether that was the right thing for me to do. So the only thing, I'm wondering whether this is true. I'll try it out as a statement. I think the only thing I would give up my business for would be to travel, would be like a round the world trip. Or like if someone in my life said, there's an opportunity for me to move to Sri Lanka, will you cut your company in half and come with me? I think I'd do it.
Wow. Amazing.
I really love seeing the world.
Well, I think a lot of people do, but you obviously prioritize it.
But this is it. I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people don't prioritize the things they really care about.
Yeah.
And I think if you know what you care about enough and you're fortunate to surround yourself with people that you can have those conversations with really candidly and like set those priorities as aligned goals, then you've just got to make stuff happen. And I think, so much of why I am where I am is that I'm the kind of person who consistently makes stuff happen.
Did you develop that trait over time, or have you always been that way?
I've always been that way. My parents are as well. They're definitely like, it means that we're disorganized and we're unstrategic because we make everything happen. Like not just the choiceful stuff. We'll just like throw our energy everywhere and we burn out all the time. But if I look at, not my brother actually, he's kind of rebelled. It's quite funny thinking about it like that. He's like, no, I'm going to be way more careful and measured than you freaks. But me, my mum and my dad definitely just throw ourselves head first at everything we do. So no, I think it's like upbringing.
Wow. And that's a unique trait. And a lot of people attribute their success to that, as being able to just move quickly and take action, because a lot of people are stuck in that awkward zone of wanting to do something, but fear holding them back or overthinking things.
I don't overthink, and I've got really good strategies to prevent overthinking. So I think overthinking is so risky. And like, for example, when I launched my recruitment business, I wrote a sentence that was like, if I successfully help you find someone, you'll pay me £250. This will be payable in an invoice or whatever. And I made that an email signature so that every time I got an email about hiring someone, I would just use that signature. And that was my proposition. Versus many people I speak to today who will say to me, like, I haven't launched my business yet because my developer's still refining my website. And I'm like, cool, have you told 30 people who are your target market that this is what you're selling? And they're like, no, because I'm waiting for my website and my like pitch deck and my whatever. Fuck all of those things. Like, you just need a sentence written down somewhere, or like a sentence on a post-it that you just send as a voice note. Like, what is the minimal version of what you're trying to do that you can take to market to start learning? And if I think that the human emotion that I hate the most in life is like disappointment when someone's tried really, really hard and it goes wrong. Like, that feeling of wasted effort just breaks my heart. Like, oh God, it literally kills me if I see that someone's like really tried to make something beautiful and it's a disaster. Like, oh. And so I spend my whole life avoiding that feeling. And so what that means is I'm actually intentionally quite lazy about stuff. So in those early supper clubs, it would have made way more sense for me to do like seating plans and name tapes and like set dress the whole thing and create a bit of theatre around it. But that would have made me feel so uncomfortable because the risk that it might have gone wrong would be too high. When instead, by like refusing to put any effort into it and being like, we're going for pizza, that's it, I had protected myself from that fear of disappointment, but I'd also inadvertently created a really refreshingly relaxed atmosphere, because other people hate that feeling when someone's tried really hard too. Actually, as humans, we all really enjoy the feeling that no one's that emotionally invested because we all relax. Versus like, we'll all know that feeling when you like go to a party at your random, some aunt you don't know very well, and it's all like so perfect. Like, there's so much love in it all that no one relaxes because everyone's just so tense. versus when you just turn up at a mate's house on a Friday night and it's all really unplanned and there's like some beers in the fridge and no one's thought about it and everyone's so chilled. That's because it's not imbued with loads of awkward effort.
Yeah.
So by refusing to put effort into stuff, I think I've actually created a really relaxed culture, and I've made it possible for me to do it without overthinking.
That's really interesting. It reminds me of I don't know if you'd call it a concept, but it's called with or without you energy. And it's normally referred to in like cold outreach and things like that, where it puts a lot of pressure on a person that you want to attend your event or be a speaker, things like that, when it seems that the event is reliant on them saying yes. And it freaks the person out, and then they delay and they put it off. Whereas if you have the with or without you energy and just you say, hey, I'm putting on this event, X amount of people are coming, would love if you could make it, but like no pressure. They're more inclined to say yes because it doesn't seem like it's reliant on them. And you can apply that to, you know, cold outreach or anything like that, where it's like, my business is going to be successful. If you want to join and be a client, great. If not, cool. And it like takes the pressure off making those decisions. So I find it fascinating. I've heard it come up in quite a few like examples.
I love that. It's powerful in so many ways.
Yeah, it can be used.
I've also interestingly seen that play out in like managing other people. So there's a way you can motivate people around you where it's like, you are integral to this. I need you so much.
Yeah.
And that's motivating in one way, but it's also completely suffocating because you hear loads of pressure when it sounds counterintuitive, but to actually allow someone to get comfortable with the idea that they could go and do something else and that you could replace them means that they're like there because they want to be there, not because they think that you're going to become a puddle if they're not.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that applies in so many situations. Thanks for the tip off. I'm going to research that.
No problem. Daniel Priestley is the one that I got it from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And in terms of work, like some people believe in balance and other believe that like if you love what you do, it never feels like work. What's your view on work?
My view is that there are two types of activity in the world. Again, this is a theory I made up 1 second ago, so let's see how this goes.
Awesome.
Okay, I think there's two types of stuff. One is things that are work, so they take energy from you. One is things that are rest, so they give you energy. It's no coincidence that working out in the gym has the word work in it. Like, it's absolutely a type of work.
Yeah.
So for me, there's a whole category of stuff in my life that is like mostly in the work camp. So exercise, my job, some socializing, going to see that friend that you feel like you should see, but really it's really far away and you don't want to do it, whatever. All of that stuff, you know, there's a whole load of things, or like cleaning the house. There's like worky stuff. And then there's stuff that's restful, like seeing people I love and going for a walk and whatever. And they definitely blur between the two. But I don't think about work-life balance just in the sense of like, am I doing the thing I'm paid to do, or am I doing the thing I'm not? Like, am I not being paid? It's like, I love my job, and I also love going to the gym, and I love being sociable, but I need to make sure I get enough rest. And so really, I would work all day, every day, because I love it, but the exhaustion kills me.
Right.
And so that's why I need balance. It's not because I hate work and I'm trying to work out how to do as little of it as possible. It's because without that balance, it's completely unsustainable.
That makes sense.
So I need to make sure I've got enough activities that are opposing that like work draining effect. And I'm feeling it really acutely today. I've had such a nice 3 days off, but it was busy doing lovely things. And in the gaps between everything, I was working. So if I was on the bus, I was like pen on the back of an envelope, like scribbling down thoughts. my brain did not shut down for 3 days. And it's got to Tuesday and I'm back at work and I feel wiped. Like I feel really, really tired. And that's because I've done 3 days of deep thinking. On the back of a week of calls.
And how do you intentionally balance that? Because I mean, you've just explained your thought process, and so you're obviously aware of it, and yet we just had a long weekend, and now you're feeling tired from it. So how do you? Is it like self-control, or like how do you?
Yeah. So like tonight, I know I need to stop at 6:30, and I need to lie on my sofa and like eat a pizza. So some of it's control, some of it is a bit of better planning. So I have a prioritization coach who I spend the first hour of every working week with, and she was like, "You're drained. What are you doing next weekend? Go into your diary now and write yourself a massive reminder that you're not doing any work for at least one day. You need a day of being actually off." What else do I do? I'm pretty proactive about this stuff. I had a breakdown 4 years ago, 3 years ago, because work just, like my addiction to work and my inability to get this balance just literally left me bedridden for 6 weeks. So since then, I've been pretty like hot on it. Like I don't compromise on sleep. I don't compromise on exercise. I only eat good food. That stuff comes first, and then the day job fits around it.
I'm fascinated. You mentioned a prioritization coach. How has that helped you?
I mean, I'm on week 4, so I wouldn't say it's like a long-term habit. I have a big team and a lot of external contacts. And if I'm not really careful, I will be on the phone from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. all day, every day, without a break. And I've done that for years and years and years. But what happens is that you don't really do any thinking. And the business is now at a point where it really needs me to be strategic and to, like, basically my job now is to make like 3 really good decisions a week and to communicate those really effectively to the people involved. That is effectively my value. That won't happen if I'm only on calls.
Yeah.
So I just have someone who goes through my diary and is like, "Why are you recording that podcast? Could you cancel it?" And I have to like argue for everyone. I'm like, "No, I really want to do it because I said I'm going to do it." And it's really good for me to have to justify it. And like, she's obviously like, she's going to let some of it go. But I probably cancelled like 4 meetings this morning just from that conversation, because there are a few where I'm like, you know what, actually someone else could do that. Or like, you are right, I don't really know what that's about. So why don't I send an email and like ask for an agenda and just clarify that before I go into that call? Or, you know, just like that kind of rigor that if you don't stop and pause, you end up just rolling through.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get in control a bit of my priorities, know what I want to deliver in a month, and do that, not just do what's asked of me.
And how do you balance like staying true to your word? Like, I really appreciate you just told me that you're really busy, but you're having a conversation with me, so I feel really special. But
well, no, because there's such a risk to this. You just sound like such a self-satisfied, like not that busy. Like we've all got stuff going on.
But I mean, how do you also balance that where like you made a commitment, but then after having this meeting with your coach, realize that maybe it's not that important? And is it just communication?
I think it's, yeah, I'm a big fan of voice notes, because I think a voice note that says like, "Look, I hate being this person. Like, I don't feel good about this, but this is where I'm at and this is what I'm doing." And I, you know, whatever, that's one approach. The other is like seeking to understand a bit more. I think a lot of it's just like those extra questions in advance of like, what's the objective of this? Because really, like a lot of the time, what you discover is either you're not the best person or that you can just send them the answer.
Sure.
Like with calls, it's just like, tell me, like, what are you hoping to get out of this? And then you can be like, "Oh, look, to be honest, I'm really not in a position to support you with that for another 6 weeks." Or, "Oh, cool, let me just send you the link." Or like, "Oh no, okay, I get it. Let's definitely chat." So I think it's most of the time it's just been like seeking to understand has meant I can be way more specific as opposed to it being a case of me actually having to flake.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Although I am also trying to just get much better at flaking. Like, it's completely fine to say to a friend, I'm just not going to be fun on Wednesday night. I know we said we were going to have dinner, but like, it's just not worth it. Because I think we're all of the age where, like, I'm in my mid-30s, my friends are always delighted. Like, every time I do that, the response is like, oh my God, amazing. I'll go to yoga. You babe. Thank you. And I'm like, cool. My treat. You have your evening back.
Yeah, that is fascinating. But I'd just like to speak a bit more about Upworld and how important was it for the growth and success of Upworld to niche down on marketing specifically? Have you ever been tempted to like broaden to other?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Oh yeah. I get asked once a week to start a community for sales or design or whatever. So I run two businesses. Upworld is one, and then I run an agency. An agency where we run fractional marketing teams called Brand Hackers, and both of them are fairly niche. I would honestly say both of them would be twice the size if they were more niche.
Interesting.
I really think that Upworld is for really, if we're explicit, it's for B2C marketers in businesses of between 500k and 5 million revenue. That's who we give the most value to. I've been really nervous about stating that because I hate feeling exclusive.
Is it?
But every time we are more tailored in our proposition for anything, we get a better outcome. So kind of watch this space. I think we're going to become more and more niche.
Interesting.
And then we might launch another niche, but I'll launch it explicitly as another niche because otherwise I think your audience don't know if they're talking to you.
How do you know whether it's the right niche to continue down that path, to like go deeper on that specific niche?
Do they want what you're selling and like really want it? Like, are they buying it easily? And I think there's this feeling, like the product market fit feeling is real when you're just getting like nods and stuff is moving. And you might have issues around getting to the customer, but you know when you're talking to the right person, they're kind of just like biting your hand off for it. So I think you've got to have that feeling and codify what that means to you. But I also think you just know when you've got it and then check that the niche is big enough to support your commercial goals.
And how difficult is it to grow out a community? Because I feel like the community space is kind of gaining popularity at the moment as a business model.
I think it's really hard and I think it's a terrible business model. So I would never, ever recommend to anyone to build a community as a business because community is meant to be free. Community is meant to be the way we organise society. Like in the past, we'd have our local church and we'd live in our village and that would be our community. You don't pay to be a member of that. It's like an inherent right of being a human. It's also not, it doesn't like in the spirit of like vitamins and painkillers, like a community is not a painkiller. You're not like crippled with loneliness and then a community is going to make it all go away. So it's really hard to sell and it's really hard to get value for. It's also innately labour intensive because while people say that communities are self-sustaining, communities to remain healthy need lots of like nurturing. I think the good metaphor for this is like a community is like a garden. So you can absolutely like leave your garden to grow on its own, but it's kind of going to like grow over and fill with weeds quite quickly. Community management is like gardening. Like you have to really nurture and support that life so that it like grows into something beautiful. So it's labour intensive, it's difficult to scale, it's hard to get conversion, and there isn't loads of money in it. Where it's interesting is if you're really emotionally attached to it. So like for me, I really believe in it and therefore it's worth it. I've also made it commercially viable by sort of cross-selling other services to that audience and thinking about other ways of monetizing that audience. So sponsorship, we run courses that are much easier to sell because we have the community. But the community itself is a difficult old business model.
Yeah, I've
Yeah. So I would, again, I get asked to build communities a lot, and a lot of me thinks that actually the business I should be running is like a community builders for hire. Like, I think that would be a really interesting business. Right now, I actually don't know how I could credibly sell that because I don't know what the answer is. So I'm sort of still on an education, and when I work it out, then I'll start doing it as a service.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm not sure if you're familiar with Alex Hormozy.
No.
He creates a lot of business focused content. He's a huge buff guy with a big beard. But he recently bought like 50% of School,
Oh.
the community platform. And he's created a thing called School Games where he teaches people how to start a community and monetize it and stuff. And so I think that's sort of turned people's attention towards community building. And so I'm interested, do you use a particular platform, or did you build your community platform from scratch? Or
We use Memberspace and Slack.
okay.
We very intentionally built to be where our members are, not where we want our members to go. So 60% of our members were using Slack at the time, and therefore it felt really logical that it should just be another workspace integrated into their flow, into like their daily rituals. I think communities, I think it's just hard to scale, and it's hard to get the P&L to work. I think that's where it falls apart. Like, you can look at the numbers on the back of an envelope, but it takes like 2 people to run my community. And that's quite a lot of salary.
Yeah. And at the beginning, I feel like with some communities, it's kind of like a chicken and egg problem, because you need enough people in the community for it to feel like it's of value to the people wanting to join the community. But if there aren't enough people in the community, then people are hesitant to join. So how did you get around that problem? Or did you have enough people interested first when you launched? You knew you'd have enough?
We started off as WhatsApp groups.
Okay.
And we grew out the WhatsApp groups, and then we moved platforms twice. And so by the time we moved to this first platform we used, which was so bad, we knew that there was going to be enough, that we knew that enough people would come with us. And again, like, WhatsApp was just, I didn't even think about it. It was like, how do I gather whatever it would have been in the first place, like 50 people in one place? Or like a WhatsApp group was the obvious conclusion. And then this was way before WhatsApp community. So I actually think now, if it was for WhatsApp communities, we'd probably be a WhatsApp business. But we moved to Slack before WhatsApp had lots of the functionality they now have.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because, WhatsApp makes sense because it is the lowest hanging fruit. I mean, everyone has WhatsApp.
Exactly. It's the lowest hanging fruit. It's also where you talk to your friends.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what we do is create a sociable space around professional topics. And so I actually think the slight friction of it being on WhatsApp would have been really right for our brand.
Awesome. And were there any hesitations or fears of starting the community aspect of it all, or did you just dive right in?
I've got more hesitations and fears now about continuing to run it than I did at the beginning. Like, as I said, there was no plan. I was just like, members needed this. I was making people's lives better. I'd had such a tough time going through the transition on my own. I just wanted it to exist. Now I've got hesitations around how do I future-proof this? How do I make sure it's a thing that doesn't like ever dwindle? Like, I never want to look at it and think, oh, that was great once. You know, like, I feel like at some point in my old age, like, I've got this vision of me at like 60 where I'm going to have to just pull it and be like, that's the end. Because I don't want it to die. I want it to like end strong. So yeah, I've got loads of hesitations and fears about what it becomes in the future, but there was never the time to think about that. I was just following my nose.
And what would you like it to look like in the future when you're 60 and considering pulling the plug?
I want it to be all around the world. Like, I really want there to be local hubs in 20 key cities and a whole load of people who can talk really openly about how being part of something has made their lives a bit richer. And we have that at the moment. We just have it in a baby way. So it's just formalizing and like better codifying what we do.
And do you prioritize scaling at all, or is it more nurturing the people that are in the community and them being the advocates for you, or is there a balance between the two?
We haven't prioritized scaling it until now. I think we probably need to. And I really haven't wanted to because it's felt like a distraction. Like our core job is to serve our members. And I feel like anything other than that is a bit of a, I don't know, it's like taking my eye off the ball.
Yeah.
But if we're at like 1,100 paying members at the moment, if we were at 1,600, this business would be a lot easier to run. Like that extra revenue wouldn't require loads more work and would make things a lot less tense behind the scenes. And so that's my goal. Like I think I do need to work out how to do that.
Interesting.
Just because if it, a bigger business will bring in a bit more money, which will just mean that there's like a bit more ability to put some support in place for the team, which I'd really like to do.
Yeah. And what has your experience been building out your team? You mentioned you have 20 in your team right now, is that right?
Across the two businesses, yeah. I mean, it's been such a journey. I am so grateful that I've posted on LinkedIn every day for 4 years. That's like my headline thought on this. Like the quality of candidate, which is formal language for like, I'm honestly bowled over by the kind of people who apply for jobs in my business. And I'm so humbled that they want to work for me. And the only reason they know about me is because of LinkedIn. And so, yeah, it's been a joyful process for many years because my personal brand's been strong enough to do that. Early days, it was like mad. Like it was all the same, like begging favors off friends, coercing someone's little sister into doing an internship. Like it was just anything to get people to say yes, because there was nothing for them to say. Like there was no reason for them to take a punt on me. And again, I think that's something that like early stage, anyone like early in their business journey really needs to be humble about. We do a lot of recruitment work and I speak to a lot of early stage founders who just don't get that their job isn't the sexiest opportunity in the universe. And the reality is no one's heard of your business. It's a complete punt. No one knows who you are. Like, why on earth should someone take that risk? But for me, it's been wonderful. And I think the people I work with are pretty phenomenal.
Why did you decide to start writing on LinkedIn every day?
Because a friend of mine used to run a course that taught like people how to do their own PR. And she came out to her family, and then that week she posted on LinkedIn telling the world she was gay, and the response was phenomenal, like really amazing and really positive. But also her inbox was like on fire with people wanting to do her course, and she was like, "This is really weird. Like, it's got no relationship to my sexuality has no relationship to my ability to teach you how to do PR. Like, what is this? Why are you doing this?" But she was like, this clearly works. So then she kept going. And I just watched her journey and was like chatting to her throughout the whole thing, kind of being like, this is mad, what's going on? And she was like, I know, it's mad. And like, look at my inbox. And like, she was just live blogging the whole thing to me. And I was just like, I want a bit of that. Like, I want the same effect. So I just started writing whatever. And still to this day, every morning I write something. And some days, today has been terrible. I've got like 4 likes. Some days it's just like absolute tumbleweed, and other days I went completely viral about 2 weeks ago and got 750,000 impressions and was top of Reddit for 48 hours. And then it drives a whole load of traffic and inbound stuff, and then it will go quiet again. But I was inspired.
Yeah, and why not? If you can allocate a bit of time to it, I mean, the upside far outweighs the downside. And
yeah, I can go on and on about it.
What has been the hardest part of you running your businesses so far?
For a long time, it was like looking after my mental health. That really was the challenge. I think now it's actually nice reflecting that isn't the challenge, that isn't the number one challenge anymore, because it really was for so long. Now the biggest challenge is how to focus. Like I am trying to do way too much and I know it, but I don't know how to stop. And I think that's true on like a macro level where you're like, I'm running 3 businesses. Like, what? That's insane. And then on a micro level, it's just like, how do I manage my headspace so that I know what I'm not focused on? So yeah, right now it's all about focus.
And if you had to offer advice to someone wanting to start their own thing, where would you suggest they start?
I think my advice comes back to that story around just writing an email signature. Like, do the least possible work to get real feedback from your customers. Do not overwork something in your own brain. Like, as soon as you can start working out loud, the better. And recognize that your job is to be a servant to your customers. It's not to like put this thing that you've dreamt up into the world. And I know that there are other entrepreneurs that really disagree with me on this and like really don't see things that way and feel like they have an amazing vision that they need to like do on their own and then the world will love it. That's just so not my style. So for me, the only way I know how to do it is ask for feedback at every single point and listen to it really deeply.
So that's great advice. To end every episode, I ask my guests if they have a question for me.
So I'm really trying to think about focus at the moment. And I'm also really trying to think about how I scale the community. I want to know how you think, and the context for this is I think you have done a lot of really interesting reading on outbound sales and on growth that I need more of, because you've name dropped 2 things that sound really interesting that's written on a massive post-it here. How do you think I should scale my community?
I would use, well, this is something I'm learning about and quite interested in social leverage. So one approach I'm actually testing at the moment for a client is going on socials like LinkedIn and Twitter and finding people who are tweeting about problems that his product can solve, and then responding to those posts saying, I have a solution, and either sending a loom directly to them or a loom in the comments being like, hey, this is what we do and I think it's quite interesting. And you target people with quite large followings, and if it's like a low pressure situation where you genuinely just solve their problem, they're quite inclined to speak about it more on your behalf. And so it's just leveraging other people's followings by genuinely just solving their problem and just having like a good-hearted attitude to it with no ulterior motive. It's just like, hey, I'm working on a solution to your problem and here it is.
Yeah. Love that. Thank you very much.
Awesome. No problem. So thanks for joining me today, Lottie. I really appreciate you taking the time. If people want to find out more about everything you're working on, where can they do so?
LinkedIn is honestly the best place. You can tell I'm passionate about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best place to find me. Lottie Unwin on LinkedIn, and then send me a DM. There's a link tree there that has will take you to all the different bits of what I do. And if anyone is in like anything to do with startup marketing, honestly, I can help. So Byron just said social leverage, like there is not a problem I can't direct you to the right person for if you're in the space of B2C B2C startup marketing.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lottie. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.